Last week, President Biden took on Texas's abortion law, saying it, quote, blatantly violates the constitutional right established under Roe v. Wade. The statement deepened tensions between the president and Catholic leaders in the U.S. Mr. Biden has been a devout Catholic his whole life and says that issues like abortion are personal. But as Ruby Cramer from Politico writes, some of his political and religious beliefs are now clashing very publicly. I'm joined now by Ruby, a senior staff writer for Politico. So tell us, President Biden obviously is only the second Catholic U.S. president, the first, of course, being John F. Kennedy. Does being Catholic make it hard for a political figure when abortion is at the forefront of our discussions of politics right now?
Hi, Lana. It's certainly a complicated and personal issue, and that was the thrust of what we were trying to get at in this piece. It's both an incredibly private thing, because at the end of the day, we're talking about a person's faith. And at the heart of the Catholic faith is communion, which is, at the end of the day, it's a personal moment between that person and God. So there's really nothing more personal. But at the other side of this, we have the second Catholic president of the United States, and he occupies a very public role in that respect. So it's hard to know where the line between public and private stops when it comes to this. Now at the center of Joe Biden's young presidency, we have sort of the potential threat and dismantling of reproductive rights and abortion laws as we know them today. And that the fact that the president, who sort of is now having to reckon with this, is Catholic and is, as you said, a devout and very observant person, that's an incredibly fraught and personally complicated situation for him. But he has made no sort of qualms about his position. He's vowed to fight that law. He has promised a full government approach to battling that law. So it's definitely a complicated topic, and one that he has been very sensitive about in how he chooses to address it.
And Ruby, in 2019, the president changed his position on the Hyde Amendment. Tell us, how have the president's views on abortion and his comments on Texas's abortion law impacted his standing in the Catholic community? And in most cases, somebody says, my religious beliefs are my own personal beliefs and they're private, and that's the end of that. But in this case, it has potential real ramifications when the president is trying to take a stand when it comes to issues of public policy like this.
Yeah, I certainly don't think we've ever seen a president's own church seeking to undermine him in any sort of way, as we've seen with the situation with President Biden and the U.S. hierarchy of the Catholic Church. That sort of body is made up of bishops and archbishops and cardinals, sort of known and organized under the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. And what we saw earlier this summer, even before the Texas law drew even more attention to this issue, is the bishops weighing a document that would have addressed the idea of pro-choice politicians taking communion, with the obvious target being the president. So, like I said, I don't think we've ever seen a president sort of having to grapple with the leadership of his own church not being accepting of that person. So now that this Texas law is sort of at the forefront of things, I think it'll be really interesting to watch what the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops does. They have yet to put out a statement on this. So in terms of going forward for President Biden, I think he's been very unequivocal about where he stands in vowing to fight the law. And at the end of the day, I think he will keep coming back to that, but it may raise tensions that are already existing between him and his own church.
And Ruby, you made reference to the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops debating barring politicians, and specifically pro-abortion politicians, from receiving communion. Give us an update on that process and where things stand with that now.
So essentially what we've seen from them so far is going back to the beginning of President Biden's tenure and in fact his election. So last November, after he was elected, the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops the president of that group decided to put together what he called a task force to deal with the quote unquote difficult and complex situation of the Biden presidency and the issues that sort of the pro-choice Catholic president posed in the eyes of some of these more conservative bishops. And so they put together that task force. That task force then weighed the idea of putting together a document of some kind that would address this idea of, is it okay for pro-choice politicians to take communion? Should bishops be encouraged to deny those people communion, those public figures? Should a special onus or attention be paid to Catholics in public life, Catholics who are political, who occupy public office? And so that document was then sort of debated in a very long, hours-long open meeting that was held this June. And now we're going to see that debate continue in November when the bishops meet for the first time in person since before the pandemic started. And I think at that point, they'll weigh what kind of document they want to move forward with. I know from speaking to bishops that there are a lot of people who think this is a bad idea, that think, in the Catholic Church right now, coming out of a pandemic, potentially the worst thing to do would be to put forward some sort of public statement that was exclusionary in some way when, many people want to see more Catholics coming back to Mass and want to see those numbers increase. I mean, those numbers have been on the decline, and there's a big worry among bishops about whether there's, a strong enough belief and understanding in the Eucharist, which is the central sort of heart of the Catholic Church and the sort of center of the Mass. So, I mean, this is a complicated issue. There are lots of things involved that sort of go beyond politics and that have to do with where the Catholic Church is heading.
And it's worth noting that that while President Biden is only the second Catholic president, there are many other Catholic politicians, and interesting too that when John F. Kennedy was campaigning for the presidency, one of the questions put to him was whether he would be beholden to Rome or to the U.S. Constitution. So it's something that is obviously a ongoing. There's a level of interest in that, but certainly people are multifaceted. All right, Ruby Cramer, thank you.